It's 8 o'clock and it's Thursday, the 7th of December, and I'm here doing my Facebook takeover of the Romance Devoured website on Facebook. My name is Emma Calin, and I'm the face behind the author who writes suspense romance series, the Seduction series, the Love in a Hopeless Place collection, and the children's books, the Once Upon a Now series. Now then, the reason that I've come on today is I wanted to share with you my new Christmas novella, which I've got a copy of it here. It's called Seduction of Santa, and it's part of my Seduction series, which is a series currently of 5 books, which are all based around female cops who basically are very passionate in dealing with their job. They love to lock up criminals. They like to deal with justice, maybe in their own unusual ways, but they're as passionate about dealing justice as they are with dealing with their menfolk. And each female cop in each of my stories falls in love in the course of the book, and ends up in a happy ever after situation with someone who may or may not have been at the initial stages of the book obvious as a good guy. They're often bad guys. In fact, they're always bad guys, but obviously they come round in the end. So Seduction of Santa is the book I'm going to read to you from. There's many parts of this book that I can't actually read, I'm afraid, because Facebook would throw me off. So I've selected a chapter that I think shouldn't get me into trouble. It's chapter 6 from the book. It's a little way in, and it's really a pivotal moment in the romance between the main characters, Max and Paula. Paula is a cop. She's a London cop. She's in her 40s. She's divorced, and she's come across Max before, but unfortunately in a rather unfortunate situation where she was actually called to his factory, and they had a bit of an altercation, and he ended up actually reporting her for failure to do her duty. So they didn't go off to a very good start. They then met a second time in a slightly more social situation, because Paula is actually the driver of a bus in her spare time for handicapped children. And Max has a son who is handicapped and is on the bus for a trip to see the Christmas lights. And they come across each other there, and things are slightly calmer, and he begins to see that she's actually a really good person and not quite as bad as he thought. She's seeing the good side of him as well. He does some quite nice things whilst they're out for the other passengers. And the following day, he actually turns up to help her clean the bus, because after offering to buy everybody on the bus Happy Meals from McDonald's, the bus ends up in a bit of a state. And so he comes round to help her clear it. And they have a really nice time. And she starts to think that maybe he's not so bad after all. And he says, why don't they take a trip to Brighton, which is a seaside town in England, which is very popular with people from London. It's very easy to get to from London. And they decide to go on a trip there. And this is really the moment. In your life, you can sometimes identify those moments, those pivotal times where you find that that's the moment where you actually fall in love with someone, where something starts, where it's the beginning of that relationship. And this, for Max and for Paula, is that time. So I'm going to read to you now. Apologies if I start coughing halfway through. I'll try not to. So, Seduction of Santa, chapter 6. The Brighton air was cold, but clear. She felt guilty for being there, being free in somehow stolen hours with a man she shouldn't be with. Justin had taken her hand as they'd thrown pebbles into the waves beating onto the shore. He looked like any other young man, but she guessed his mental age was about 6 or 7 from what she knew of other kids that she carried on the bus with Irene. She wanted to find out more, but didn't want to talk in front of the boy. They strolled up the pier and watched while he played arcade games. Then Max took her hand, like they were an item, like that was how she was beginning to feel. She'd invited him to take it with a quick glance, with a smile, but of course she could deny that to herself if she wanted to. If she wanted to. He squeezed it with a firm gentleness a couple of times to signal an understanding and a thanks. How could she know that? How could she have tuned to a man by holding his hand? This man was a bastard. She was a lonely woman heading for 42. It was obvious she was just like a stupid kid, believing that Santa came and that you could fall in love. Naive, lonely people were always gulled in by crooks. She knew that. A cop like her would see it straight away, wouldn't she? Her marriage had ended 4 years ago, but it wasn't until a few days ago that she'd felt exposed and alone. Her heart had reopened, but so had the box of fear and insecurity. If only he would take her in his arms and hold her. If only she could walk away back to her manageable life. And then the bastard did it. He pulled her round to face him and held her. No sexual lunge or forced kiss, but a hug, a cry out to another person, a cry out to be held and validated as a someone to somebody. Wordlessly, he clung to her as she clung to him, letting her joy and fear sob into his shoulder. His hand was stroking her dark bobbed hair. The bastard was taking her, and just at this moment, she couldn't stop him. She'd kill anyone who tried to stop her living this emotion. He held her away for a moment, searching her wet eyes. "Maybe I should make you cry and say sorry," he said. "It's not you. It was happiness." "Then it must have been me who made you happy." This time she herself pulled him back, and truly powerful arms brought her close to him and wrapped around her. "What's happening here?" he asked in a deep voice as his cheek pressed against the top of her head. "I'll take the 5th. No one has to incriminate themselves." "I'm so happy you came today. That night at the yard wasn't good. Look, I don't like the police. I was angry you'd let that guy get away, and I was angry you'd stood up to me." "'Cause I'm a woman?" "I'm going to be honest and say yes to that. Yes, I'm that sort of man. A man has fear of me. What can I do with a lovely woman?" "You can liberate those poor people who work for you." "I wanted to talk about you and me today, but I saw yesterday that you truly care about others. We'll talk fully on Tuesday. It's not a simple issue." "I do know that." "If you kick over a basket of poisonous snakes, you can't afford a single one to be left." "We'll talk," she said, into his chest. Justin had just come back. Max took one of his hands and Paula the other. They ambled back along the promenade in the dusk of a winter's evening. It sure felt like happiness. "Can you come for a quick drink before I drop you home?" he asked. They were on the edge of London. She'd so much enjoyed being with him and Justin that she really didn't want to go home. All the same, she wanted to keep a line drawn. It would be a mistake to agree to it. "Yeah, I'd love to, thanks." He glanced across at her. The Bentley was wide, and while he was driving, he kept his eyes on the road. For a civilian, he drove well. He exuded a competence. He would always be the guy to take command in a crisis. "We've got a rabbit," said Justin. "I hope you're going to show me." "He eats the doormat." "And the table legs and the door," added Max, laughing. "He's naughty." "He's a rabbit," she commented. The house was luxurious but unfussy. For sure it was no show home, with scattered toys and the untidiness of family life. There was the predictable huge TV, The marble worktop kitchen with fancy island, the large dining room with posh chairs. Max busied himself with fixing a meal for Justin. "I'll get him off to bed and we can relax for a minute," he said. She raised an eyebrow. Well, she'd put her head in the lion's mouth. The problem was that she was more afraid of her own potential than his. The lad hugged her as he said goodnight. Maybe his whole life would enfold with his present innocence. Puberty would change him, and the world out there placed little value on open simplicity. At last, Max handed her a single malt whiskey with ice. He cleared a space from clutter and joined her on the sofa, sipping a Coke. He lay back his head and sighed. "Where are we now? Where are we now?" he sang in a Bowie imitation. "That's not a bad question, Max. I guess you want to talk about the workers at Meadow Chef." "I do, but not exclusively." He turned to her with a look in his eye that held her, wanted her. He reached out and stroked her cheek. She leaned her head into his large, strong hand. The power of him took away her own will, like that moment before sleep. She felt his lips. Oh, God, the feel of his lips, the warmth and tenderness of his touch. He stroked along her jawline and drew her in with an overwhelming gentleness. Could she ever open her eyes? The more she left them closed, the more he would know his power to control her. Deep inside her, she was warmed by a physical response, but she didn't want that distraction. Her own lips searched to know the landscape of this man. She guessed he was watching her, gaining that prize of her compliance, that need. She peeked out to find him closed in his own world of her, drawing a joy from her. She ran her hand across his cropped hair. The feel of fur thrilled her, almost jolted, a sense of urgency to feel his flesh, to possess his body. As he moved away, he was smiling, never losing control of her eyes. "Oh dear," she said. "Oh dear indeed, my dear." "Where are we now? Where are we now?" He let out a long sigh. "I don't know, but I do know where I'm going to be." "Where?" "I'm going to be taking you home." "Did I fail the kiss test?" "You failed the temptation test. I'm the opposite sex, you see. No woman has the right to do that to a man." "It was an accident. I didn't mean to." "A first kiss is so sad because there can never be another one. I want to keep this last moment just as a sealed thing inside myself. I don't want to lose it in 100 kisses." She studied him. She understood him completely. She'd taken him for a brute and a bully, albeit a sexy and desirable one. And now, what was she dealing with? "When would you like the other 99? "Just keep them warm for Tuesday, unless my conduct has put you off." "I'm not sure if you're a perfect gentleman or a perfect con man." Playing a longer game. "Either way, I'm perfect then." "Thanks. For today, I needed a break. I really did." "Was that all you needed?" "Look, Max, I don't know you, and you've stormed into my life, and if I started, you'd have a whole box of stuff tipped out on this floor. And look at the state of the place already. Look, take me home before I double park in your first kiss space." He lowered his eyes, stood up and stroked her hair. He was so right not to push further. She had not met any man like this before. If he'd touched her, she would have had no resistance. "How can you just leave Justin to drive me home?" "Oh, there's a self-contained annex, and I have a housekeeper. I know this place is a mess, but I like it to be a home. When I'm away on business or at the stables, things get kind of womanized. Justin's not too tidy, and we man out together." "You love him so much, don't you?" "Sure. I'm guessing you know some of my history." "Max, I did read your wiki entry." "It's not too far off the whole truth. Yes, he was born to my ex-wife. We tried for a baby, you know. This is where you put the obvious question. She knew what that question would be. Was there DNA proof of parentage? If you know the question, what's the answer? The answer is that he was born to my ex-wife. She'd been a woman I'd loved. I don't love her now, but that boy is like the kiss we've just had. He came from a particular context of time, and there he's fixed. You might have kissed me wishing that it was some other man. I might have kissed you, wanting just to get you to bed. You know we can all look up at the stars and tear apart any meaning of this tiny life on this tiny planet. But a helpless babe looking up at you is a universe, and a betrayal is a supernova explosion to break your heart. I walked away from that episode of my life with some love still in my soul. I left the bitterness to the lawyers. And no, I've never done a DNA test. She couldn't answer him. Tears burned behind her eyes. He was so wise, so different from the man she'd first met. She pulled him to her in a way that she'd never handled a man. He felt so strong, so tireless and hard. She wasn't ready to intrude into his emotions. She sensed a swirl of pride, ambition, and dominance in his psyche. Although he could think reflectively, she was sure that he could also lash out in passion, and you might not want to be there. Max, thanks so much for letting me inside like that. It's nothing. I can get really boring. You can't leave me wallowing, though, in my own selfish mess. Give me somewhere to start, to unravel your own ball of string. I had a husband and a best friend, and now they're an item and I'm not. Easy solution, fall in love with your best friend and marry them. She was a girl. Times have changed, anyone can be anything. Not me. So how did that leave you feeling? She was still holding him. She sighed, and he seemed to sense her soft abandon into him. He pulled her to his chest, and again he stroked her hair. It left me feeling ashamed. Shame is when you put yourself in other eyes and know how they're seeing you. You kind of live in that other-mindedness that you fucked up and everyone knows it. That feeling hardens like a jagged bone, a broken bone heals, and you don't want to move it. Everyone pats your back, and one day all the doctors go away and you're alone. And now? That's where I've stayed. You get used to not poking the wound. Your system closes down. You allow yourself anger because that's respectable. The loneliness hardens to shame, like that no one wanted you. Max, I'm not really making sense. I've never really talked like this, and it's making me sound like some sort of desperate psycho bitch. Still, he held her. Thanks for letting me inside like that. His voice was deep and vibrated into her cheek. We kind of started in at the deep end, didn't we? Always swim up toward the light. I'll hold your hand if you'll hold mine, he said. Right, that's the end for now. If you want to find out what happens to Max and Paula and whether they do get it together and have their happy ending, which of course they will, you can check the link that I've put on the side and go and check out the book. It's currently on a special promotion because it's just been released. So it's only 99 cents, 99 pence, and you can find the link on the side. So that's the reading. I hope you enjoyed that. And I was going to show you now some of my other books. Oh, before I do that, I'm giving away a signed copy of Seduction of Santa today. So any of you that have left your names down the side will be entered into the draw, and I'll post it just after we come offline as to who's won the signed copy and get in contact with you to send it. So there's a signed copy of the print edition, and there's 2 copies of the Kindle edition, which I'll be sending out to you. What I wanted to do now was show you a couple of other books that are in the series, just so that you can have a look at those. The first book, is Seduction of Combat. That's the first in the Seduction series. It's a story about a cop, all the stories about female cops, and it's the story of her and the man that she was sent to investigate. She was actually sent deep undercover, and he's a boxer and suspected of being involved in a mafia gambling ring. She's sent undercover to try and suss him out, but unfortunately ends up falling in love with him. And that's their story. That's Seduction of Combat. The next book I'm going to show you is the second in the series. They can actually be read in any order because each book is a standalone story, but you will find guest appearances as you go through from cops that you've met before. The next book is this one, Seduction of Dynasty, and this is the story of a very sassy London street cop called Shannon who gets sent out to the country, and she falls in love with an earl. And hopefully, if you read that, you'll find out what happens. Can a cop become a countess? Read this and find out. The third book in the series is here, Seduction of Crowns. And this is, again, another female cop who gets called to a terrorist incident in London. And the man that she rescues turns out to be a boy band star who's being kidnapped. And he demands to have her as a, somebody's waving to me in the background here. You can't see the book. Oh, there we go. How about that? Can you see the book now? He demands to have her as his bodyguard. And it's the story of what happens to them when they fall in love. She's his bodyguard. And she actually ends up, I don't want to give away any spoilers. Shall I give away a spoiler, honey? Yeah. She ends up the Queen of France. So read that if you want to have a right roaring adventure across the whole of Europe. So those are the first three novels in the series. And the fourth book in the series is actually a cookery book, which is linked to the second book. And all the recipes, the food that's eaten in the story is in the cookery book. And I've got another competition going on my Facebook page. I think there's a link to it at the bottom of this comment on this Romance Devoured page, where if you go to my Facebook page, you can enter to win the complete set of the first four books in the Seduction series on Facebook. So please take a trip over there later, and it's free to enter, and you can have a look at those books. So that's my Seduction series. I also have another collection of books, the Love in a Hopeless Place collection, which is a series of short stories and novellas, which again, they're not so much romances as stories about love or the lack of love. So you might be interested in those. And as it's Christmas, I can't help but do a little plug for my series of children's books, which I've got here, which are the Once Upon an Hour collection, which are modern day fairy stories. And the first one, which I'll show you here, is called Alf the Workshop Dog. And that's a story based on a dog that actually lives and works in a bus depot in Southampton. He really exists. And it's the story of how he got there. And one of the things that you'll find with my children's books is that they're actually aimed at middle grade readers. They're chapter books, and they have illustrations. Oops. You can see there's pictures which illustrate the story. It's divided into nice small chapters for beginning readers who are looking for something to sort of guide them through a little bit and give them a sense of achievement as they go through the story. And there are also some links. They're not actually interactive as such, but I don't know if you can see there, I've got QR codes on each page, which will take you to external material. Things like, we talk about a national anthem in this book, and you can actually hear the national anthem being sung by Oscar, who's sat over the back there. He performs as the king of Zenobia. So there's various video clips and extra photos, colour pictures, things to colour in, which are in all of the books. So that's Alf, the workshop dog. And the next one in that series is Isabella's Pink Bicycle, which is a story about a magic ferret. And again, it's a story with a bit of a moral to it. So it's an interesting book for children to read. It's available in print and Kindle. You can get it in either format, and they're ideal as stocking fillers. And the last one in that series is Cool Kid Cruncher, which is a story about essentially it's about my step-grandson called Charlie, who's a little redhead, and it's a story about how he overcomes some of the problems he has with bullying in his life. So that's Cool Kid Cruncher and the High Trapeze. Right, well, I think I've more or less reached the end of where I wanted to get to today. The next book coming out in the Seduction series, book 6, is called Seduction of Wealth, and it's the story of obviously a female London cop who finds a crashed car, and it's not just any old car, it's a Gran Turismo Maserati, and she finds it crashed up a tree in her patch, and out of it climbs a very sexy and handsome man who is very cheeky to her, and she ends up arresting him because he's just a bit too cheeky, and it looks as though he's crashed because he's being chased by some guys on a motorbike. And that's how they first meet. She ends up being assigned to him as his, not so much a bodyguard, but he's just being kept in a safe house. But things take off from there. That particular book is coming out on St. Valentine's Day, and it's part of a brand new romance-devoured box set Bad Boy Billionaires series, which is coming out in February, along with, I think there's about 20 authors involved. So there's 20 books in a box set. They're all Bad Boy Billionaires, and they're all involved in romantic situations with our heroines. So look out for that one. And I think that's about all. I don't know if anybody's written any comments. I'm just going to ask my little helper over the back. Is there anything I need to say to anybody? Oscar? Written any comments? I'm just going to ask my little helper over the back. No. Is there anything I need to say to anybody?
Don't know how it works.
Oscar? Oh well, I think that's probably the end. I think that is the end. So all that I need to do now is to finish off. Can you turn that one off, please, honey? Thank you. Do you want to come around and say goodbye as well?
Bye. Yeah, I'll say so.
What I'll say is thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate you coming along today, and it's great to get to know you. And please go over to my Facebook page and sign up for the chance to win the box set, and wish you happy Christmas.